Hello and welcome to the Dinosaw for week 29, another 7 curious interesting things I saw last week. So let's crack on. The first one is Netflix, and they're getting into games in a big way. Now clearly what you're seeing on the screen right now is a Netflix game already. So this is Stranger Things. This has already been out there, so this is not a new thing. However, they're really getting into it. So the reason we know this is if you have a look at the source code and snoop around Netflix, then you will find references to games being displayed on the UI next to the programs. So that's one thing. And the second thing is they've taken on Mike Verdu, who is ex-Electronic Arts, has got some fairly hefty games under his belt, including things like Plants vs Zombies. So has got some really good sort of not only mobile but casual gaming experience, and that also probably leads to what style of games they will be. They'll all be based on the Netflix shows, and probably also on mobile or at least tablet devices for now. So probably you'll be able to link them from your device and go and play them, whether they'll be on your local app store, I would assume. So there you go. So stay tuned for Netflix taking over the gaming world as well. As I say, probably not looking at console titles just yet, but who knows? There you go. So Goodwood Festival of Speed was last week. I had the pleasure of being there. It always is amazing. So if you don't know what it is basically a festival for anybody who's into motors, really, cars, motorbikes, that sort of thing. They usually have an exhibition space off to one side where lots of really cool stuff happens, and they have sort of the people who have jets on their arms and all sorts of things, robots and things like that. This one really caught my eye. So this is Sam Schmidt, who is taking a Corvette C8 up the hill, which is the kind of the main road up the hill where all the cars go and parade essentially, and some of them go a lot faster than others. This one is not making a bad fist of going up the hill. Note the flint wall on the left hand side. So why is this special? Well, Sam Schmidt is a quadriplegic. He had an accident in an IndyCar race in 2000, which left him basically paralysed from the neck down. So how is he driving this car? So he's looking left and right, which I think is amazing to control a car like that anyway, but he's also accelerating and braking by blowing or sucking through a tube. So blowing to go faster and sucking to go slower. So there is somebody in the eagle eyes, there he is, the eagle eyes of you. This is a left-hand drive car. There is somebody sat in that seat just in case, hovering over the steering wheel, but not making a bad go at getting up the hill fairly quickly as well. So I thought that was absolutely amazing, and obviously this is obviously where we want to go in the future, enabling people with sort of life-changing injuries to drive vehicles, have mobility, etc., etc. So that's pretty amazing. Apple Private Relay, so this is a little bit nerdy, but this is continuing Apple's privacy grind. This is the latest thing, so you don't need to use a VPN if you are using an Apple device, or at least if you've updated to iOS 15. So what they'll do is from Safari, if you're browsing in Safari, they will encrypt the data. So rather than it just going straight out to your server or your internet provider, they'll encrypt it. It'll then go to iCloud. It'll then go to a what they call a relay point or a proxy in the cloud. It will then get turned into another proxy in the cloud and then sent on to its final destination, and then obviously on the way back it does the same thing. So what that really means is your IP address that you're browsing from gets encrypted, sent up, then turned into a different IP address, sent into a different IP address, and then sent on to its destination. So nobody knows actually who you are. So now what you can't do on this is the eagle-eyed one of you out there will probably be thinking, okay, it's a VPN, I can now watch dodgy stuff and Apple are allowing me to do anything I want. Well, not exactly. It's limited to the country of your origin of your device. You can actually slide a little slider away in the settings to say, I would like this to be a bit more accurate, so I need to know that I'm in London or Loughborough or Leicester or wherever you might need to be. But there you go. So again, so the point of this is stopping your data becoming known to other people for nefarious reasons or for advertising reasons, as is Apple's want at the moment. So again, if you're in the advertising business and you use personal data and IP addresses and location to serve your adverts, it's another blow, I'm afraid. There you go. This is a really interesting company called Arcadia, and they do full court or full arena VR. So what you're actually seeing is obviously overlaid. It looks a little bit funky, but these are people running around. If you took away the background, this would be people running around a basketball court with VR headsets on. So as far as they're concerned, they're playing virtual basketball, obviously for Space Jam from Warner, so it's a bit of a tie-up with them. So basically shows you what can be done. But I thought it was interesting because it's full court. Imagine if you had this at school and this was your games class or your PE lesson, whatever you want to call it, where you're all wearing these and you're doing amazing games, trying to jump and lark about. There are some great examples on their website of essentially, stay off the lava and all that sort of stuff, or the floor is lava. And you have to walk around things and jump off things. So it's it's a knockout to Shiki's Castle, or all those sorts of games all rolled into one in VR. So actual activity where you can actually get sweaty wearing a VR headset. So there you go. They're also having national trials. So I assume what that really means is at the end of this there will be some sort of championship of virtual games, which as you can see from the overlay, you can overlay it with any sorts of graphics you want to make it more funky. So that might be quite an interesting TV spectacle of the future. New emoji. This has been a while since you've had a new emoji update from the Dinosaw, because there wasn't one last year because of COVID. So the Unicode Foundation, who put out these updates, or they update the font in the sky that all these come from, didn't do one last year. For various obvious reasons. However, this year will be the Unicode 14 update, and it's probably most notable for its inclusivity. So there are lots of really interesting things. So you can see, for instance, instead of having a princess and a prince, there is now crowned person. There are now, I think, 14 more handshakes. So depending on how you want to do your handshake, that's all good as well. Some really good ones as well, so that, empty battery, so that's probably the last emoji you will send just before your battery goes funny. The welling up and the salute and all those sorts of things are almost directly related to sort of COVID, and we salute you and all those sorts of things. So those are great. Probably most notable is, I say, in the inclusivity part of it. So and one of the most interesting ones I thought was the pregnant man or pregnant person, and I basically lifted the words from their site, which is, it recognises that pregnancy is possible for some transgender men and non-binary people as well. So so that's really, really interesting. So have a look at that. Not available yet. I think they get ratified. These are the proposed ones, but they probably are going to go ahead, and they'll arrive, or they get ratified in September, and they will arrive on your device between January and June next year, something like that. So you won't get them straight away, but have a look. I think there's like 1,000 or something. There's a huge amount of new emojis coming, so there you go. Amazon have been granted FCC, so that's a Federal Communications Commission in the US, who deal with the airwaves and commissioning the airwaves, or at least licensing them. So they have given Amazon right to use radar. Now Google had this last year, so it's not a new thing, but Amazon applied for it last month and have now got it this month, so it's been a pretty quick turnaround. So why is this interesting? Well, it basically means that radar can be used in their devices, so the Echo devices, for instance. And what does that mean? It basically means that you can then scatter radar around the room and detect things by triangulating where those things are happening, and it's very sensitive, and it can sense things like breathing patterns. So whilst you're sleeping, it can look at your breathing patterns, it can notice when you're disruptive in your sleep, for instance, which is a great health thing. We've also seen this sort of technology, or at least sort of Wi-Fi inference, being used for people who are vulnerable, or maybe elderly, who maybe need to be checked up on, so that you can tell whether they're moving, or whether they, for instance, have fallen over, or they haven't left the room in a long time, etc. So there's some really good stuff that might come out for this. So this is Amazon really going sort of big on the health side of it. What it can also do is allow you to control devices using gestures, because obviously it can tell what you're doing. So if you hold your arm up whilst you're in bed to turn off your alarm, that could be the thing that you'll be doing in the near future. And finally, this is kind of interesting for two reasons. You can own the rights to SHREK. Not only is that interesting, but this is apparently it's a thing, which I've learnt about. I've been sort of saying recently about NFTs and how you can use that to own digital rights. And if you have a digital back catalogue, if you're an entertainment company, for instance, you can then start selling your back catalogue as NFT-based artwork or animations or whatever. And also you can then give away essentially the rights to those digital animations. Now this is already a thing, it turns out, just in the actual world. So this is a company called Royalty Exchange, and they let you own the rights to things. SHREK is quite a big name. It's just come up, $2.25 million. That's 1.36 million pounds. If you would like to own the rights rights to all of the SHREK archives. So this means that any time it is played, any soundtrack, any movie, any film appears on any TV show or TV channel around the world, you will get the rights for that. Now what I thought was really interesting, again, two things I thought were interesting in this one, were not only to find out whether it's worth it or not, they published the current takings for those sorts of rights. So for instance, you can see SHREK Forever, you basically $30,000 a year you're going to look for that. So it pretty much is 10%, you buy it for 10%, or sorry, it's 10 times what the actual the price is. So it will take you about 10 years to recoup. That's really interesting. And the other thing is, if you go and have a look at Royalty Exchange, there's some really interesting stuff on there as well. And again, they tell you how much something is recouping so that you know whether it's a good deal or not. So for instance, if you wanted to buy Dirty Dancing, that would have cost you £500,000. But also, you'd be surprised that Wrecking Ball by Miley Cyrus is only earning $7,500 a year in royalties. But there you go. So go and have a look, because it's quite interesting. But if you'd like to own SHREK, I think the time is probably gone. I think it's actually tonight that it actually closes. So I'm terribly sorry if that's news to you. But there you go. Hopefully that was useful. Hopefully it was interesting, and I'll see you next week.